One of the most requested Scorestreak challenges I receive is called Air Superiority. Kill a ground-based Scorestreak with an aerial Scorestreak. Despite the description not mentioning it, you actually have to do this a whopping 10 times. It sounds easy enough, but if you're not certain what streaks count, you may be wasting a lot of time with no results. Not only this, it's not often that you can find enemies running specific ground Scorestreaks, let alone running one while you yourself have an aerial Scorestreak on hand. That means that opportunities for this challenge are few and far between. So you need to be well versed on what exactly counts and what's best to use when the chance arises. I've spent the last week heavily researching this challenge, and I'm confident I can help everyone achieve this as painlessly as possible. So first, what exactly is a ground streak and what is considered an aerial streak in this game? As it turns out, all the ground-based Scorestreaks are actually lined up in the first column. The Scarab, the Vulture, the Shock Sentry, and the RC-8. These are the only 4 Scorestreaks that register for this challenge, and thus these are the ones you need to destroy. Now don't ask me why the Vulture is considered a ground-based streak, but it is. Now for the aerial streaks, there's the Trinity Rocket, the Scorchers, the Bombardment, the Thor, and the Apex. A lot of people think that the Apex is actually a ground-based Scorestreak, but this is 100% false. Just to prove it, I used an account that was 0 out of 10 for this challenge. During the match, I earned an Apex and I called it in once the enemy produced a ground-based Scorestreak. In this case, it was the Shock Sentry. After easily taking it out with the Apex, I made sure I destroyed no other ground streaks during the entire match. After the game, I checked my progress and saw that it was now at 1 out of 10, which means that the Apex is clearly an aerial Scorestreak. So now that you know what streaks actually register, let's talk about which ones are best to use. I see a lot of people mention that the Trinity Rocket is ideal for this challenge. As it turns out, the Trinity Rocket is the absolute worst aerial streak to utilize, and there's a number of reasons why. First, it's incredibly weak. The only fresh ground-based Scorestreaks the Trinity Rocket can take out are the Scarab and the Vulture. Even if you slam all 3 rockets up an RC-8's ass, it won't take it out. I was a bit shocked to find out that the same thing was true about the Shock Sentry. Crashing all 3 rockets into the Sentry gun will not dispose of it. The second issue is that it's entirely too fast. You have to make a split-second decision half the time since it comes down at blazing fast speeds. The third issue is the auto-aim it possesses. If you happen to see a ground-based Scorestreak and you want to fire one of your rockets at it, you'd better hope there's no enemy nearby. If there is, the rocket will instantly target the enemy instead of the Scorestreak. And lastly, you can't see Scorestreaks until the very last second. As you'll see in a moment, other aerial Scorestreaks don't have this issue. Watch here as I guide this Trinity Rocket as slow as possible. The Scarab I'm aiming at doesn't show up until I'm right on top of it. Not being able to see the ground streak you're aiming for until that late isn't helpful at all. Now, like the Trinity Rocket, the Scorchers can only take out a Scarab and a Vulture. A fresh Sentry Gun or RC-8 cannot be killed by a single Scorcher. Now remember, this is just for non-damaged Scorestreaks. Clearly, if someone has already damaged a Sentry Gun or an RC-8, the Scorchers may in fact take it out in one use. One benefit of using the Scorchers is the initial radar sweep you get. If you weren't aware of this, the very first time you open the targeting map for the Scorchers, you'll get a single sweep of the entire map. If an enemy Scorestreak is currently deployed, it'll pulse red briefly. I need to note that this happens even if you don't have the Engineer perk equipped. As soon as the sweep finishes, both enemies and Scorestreaks will no longer be displayed. But this is at least useful to know where stationary streaks, such as the Shock Sentry, are currently deployed. The Bombardment, surprisingly, is incredibly powerful. Just like the Scorchers, upon opening the targeting display, a pulse will alert you of enemies and Scorestreaks. Now, unlike the Scorchers, a Bombardment can take out every ground streak in the game. In fact, a single bomb can destroy a fresh Shock Sentry. So next time you have a chance to take out a Sentry Gun, be sure to place a single bomb over it and use the other 2 elsewhere. Even more impressive is that the Bombardment can take out an RC-8. However, you have to hit it with all 3 of your bombs, but this is made slightly easier given how slow an RC-8 traverses. Your best bet is to anticipate its intended path of movement and place all 3 bombs in front of it. As it slowly trudges forward, it'll be caught by all 3 explosions and terminated. Next, the Apex. Obviously, considering this is the highest Scorestreak in the game, it has no issue destroying any of the 4 ground-based Scorestreaks. Given its extremely fast movement speed, this is a great option for the Air Superiority challenge. An Apex can absolutely cripple the slower RC-8 with its blazing fast speed. The RC-8 shield does pose a huge risk though, so your best bet is to flank the robot and cold cock him into oblivion from behind. There's two issues here. First, the cost of the Apex. Only a truly skilled player can earn the Apex in a normal game mode, so that means that this is not a very reliable tactic. Second, there's no good targeting system. Unless you happen to stumble upon a ground-based score streak, you're more or less flying blind. The good news is the RC-8 does appear on the minimap at all times, with or without the engineer perk equipped, so you can eventually track those down. Finding a vulture, scarab, or shock sentry while piloting the Apex is more or less random chance though. Lastly, the Thor. This is hands down the best score streak to achieve the Air Superiority challenge. First, it's incredibly powerful. A Thor can take down any streak in the game with no effort at all. Even an Apex will fall swiftly to the power of Thor's hammer. Second, the aerial view you're given while controlling the Thor is great for spotting enemy score streaks. Unlike the sweeping pulse the bombardment and the scorchers give you, which only momentarily highlight a score streak, the Thor will permanently display them glowing a bright yellow. I should note that this is only while engaged in the thermal mode, which happens by default by the way. Third, the duration of the streak itself. It'll last a whopping 60 seconds. Your enemy could call in several score streaks during that amount of time, which means you can potentially rack up quite a few notches towards this challenge in a single attempt. And finally, the controls of the Thor. I feel like a lot of people may not be aware of what the Thor can actually do. It comes equipped with two firing modes. The first is a guided barrage of 5 missiles that follows your target reticle. You can use this to saturate an area with explosions, and this clustered strike can take out most streaks in one direct hit. The second mode allows you to launch the missiles individually and unguided. The best part about this method is that it zooms in. I much prefer this firing mode when I engage ground-based streaks. That added zoom level helps pinpoint score streaks much easier. Now the final tip I wanted to give is the speed burst the Thor possesses. If you hold the grenade toss button, it'll cause the Thor to speed up its orbit, getting you into position to bombard your enemies or streaks more effectively. As I'm sure many of you are aware if you've attempted this challenge already, this can be an extremely slow going process. You can run these aerial streaks every game for 10 prestiges straight and not get 10 kills, simply because you'll rarely find anyone running the Scarab, the Vulture, the Shock Sentry, or the RC-8. I finished this challenge in 7 prestiges by running the Trinity Rocket, the Scorchers, and the Bombardment each and every game. That's how few and far between ground-based streaks are. Luckily, Infinite Warfare has some game modes that cater to this challenge very nicely. There's 2 modes you want to play if and when they become available: Drop Zone and Mayhem. The problem with Drop Zone is that you can't run your own streaks. You're at the mercy of random drone packages. Should you acquire a Bombardment, Thor, or Apex, simply hold on to it in case the enemy calls in one of the 4 ground-based streaks. Now Mayhem, on the other hand, is by far the most effective and fastest way to complete this challenge. Since score streak progress doesn't reset upon death in this mode, you should technically get all your streaks every game, and sometimes even more than once. Not only this, but most people run the RC-8 each and every game. You'll also occasionally find the Shock Sentry and the Vulture, but nowhere near as prevalent as the RC-8. So to optimize this potential, you'll want to run the Bombardment, the Thor, and the Apex. These 3 aerial score streaks will almost guarantee you get at least 1 notch for this challenge each match of Mayhem you play. So once you acquire your streaks, you have to be patient. While it's true even newbie boobies will eventually earn all their streaks, it'll take them a bit longer than you. So once you get your streaks, wait until the enemy calls in a ground streak before you use them. Once you hear an RC-8 has been deployed, you can use your Thor. As I mentioned earlier, the RC-8 will be glowing a yellow color, which makes finding and destroying it quite easy. A guided 5 missile barrage will terminate the monstrous robot instantly if all connect. But if it's on the move and you need a little more zoom, switch to the single fire mode and rapid fire those missiles in this pathway. Now if you're already up in your Thor when an RC-8 gets called in, you'll hear the announcer state that a hostile RC-8 is on patrol, and you can easily see where it lands due to the spectacular entrance it makes. You can then instantly take it out and ruin the owner's day. One other tip I can offer while in the Thor is to use the pause screen to your advantage. If you know an RC-8 is deployed somewhere but you don't see him in your Thor, that means he's in a building. If you pause the game, the map overview will display where the RC-8 is currently at. You can both follow its movements and know which building it's in. and then when it comes out of safety, you can easily dispose of him. The same tactics apply for the Apex. Wait until you hear either a shock sentry or an RC-8 gets called in. The RC-8 will easily be located due to its permanent presence on the minimap. Simply fly to it and flank behind its deflective shield and you'll be good to go. Now don't forget to make good use of the bombardment in this mode as well. Like I mentioned before, the RC-8 is incredibly slow. If you anticipate its movements, you can easily place the 3 bombs a short distance in front of where you expect it to be moving, and it'll be a sitting duck. Unfortunately, neither Drop Zone or Mayhem are permanent game modes. While it's true they will eventually return to the rotation, it could take a while. In this case, your best bet is to just run the 3 mid-tier streaks, the Trinity Rocket, the Scorchers, and the Bombardment. It'll definitely be slow going, but if you're able to earn them each and every game, you may as well hold on to them and wait and see if your enemy drops one of the 4 ground-based streaks to at least give you a shot. Now of course, if you're able to earn the Thor or the Apex in a standard game mode, by all means utilize those skills. Should the enemy deploy a ground-based score streak when you have one of those in reserve, you should be all but guaranteed a successful attempt. Many people run the drone package, which will always give them the possibility of earning a shock sentry or even an RC-8. Still, unless you get incredibly lucky with a Trinity Rocket or a random Scorchers, this will likely take a while. So my best recommendation is to wait for the Mayhem game mode to return, and then utilize the tactics I've outlined, and in particular, the Thor and the Apex. Hopefully some of these tips I've mentioned with all the aerial streaks can help notch some points for this challenge. If nothing else, at least you'll know for certain what ground-based and aerial-based score streaks count. If you know the enemy and you know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself, but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you'll also suffer a defeat. If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. And that's the art of war.